Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, coach, mentor, and dare I say, tormentor, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Jim, I'm good. Just good to spend some time with you, recording pods, catching up a little bit. Just my day's always better when I get to spend some time with you.
Same here. Well, this is pod number 91. And why don't you just kind of give us a rundown? What are we talking about in 91 and 92 as well?
Yeah, in 91, we're going to introduce this concept of shaping the culture you need. I think every church, every business already has a culture, whether you acknowledge that or not. But let's be honest. Some businesses, some churches have wonderfully healthy cultures, and others not so much. We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about things we never learned in Bible school.
No, no,
we really do. We spent a lot of time talking about that stuff. Today's one of those. Today's subject is one of those things that I was never taught in Bible school.
It's funny because it is theological. There is. I mean, you could use the Greek or Latin, the ethos, that sort of thing. But it certainly is. It has always been there. Jesus created a culture. Mm-hmm. Apostles brought culture from one kingdom to another. That sort of thing. Culture is not a non-biblical thing, but again, I think we think, well, is it theological? Well, it's too practical to be theological, but this is it. A great culture, when people know what to do and no one tells them what to do, because it's just the culture of this place, you feel it. A friendly church, inviting place, spiritual environment, the humility of the leaders or arrogance and judgmentalism. You can feel it walking in. It doesn't take long before you know whether you're in the right place or the wrong place. And it's not doctrine because no one said a word yet. It's culture. I'm welcome here or I'm not. In the first 90 seconds of arriving on the property, the culture of the church to some degree, and you're already responding to it. That's
right. And that's really true. That happens a lot. So when we talk to leaders about shaping culture, sometimes we get head nods and immediate buy-in. Other times we get blank stares and shoulder shrugs. But here's the truth about culture. Culture is fuel.
Yes.
And, Jim, we encourage churches to craft vision and develop a playbook. And you can craft an amazing vision, a compelling vision, a mouth-watering picture of this destination down the road. You can have a dynamic playbook, but only a healthy culture provides the fuel for that vision and playbook to become reality. And so what we're going to talk about today matters so much because culture has the capacity to fuel the vision that God has put in your heart for the organization you do. This works in churches, this works in businesses.
Yes, yeah.
But a toxic culture will always win over a great vision and a great playbook.
Yes.
So that's why we're talking about it today because it matters so much. So in this first pod 91, part one of this, I would like to talk about just simply identifying core values. I worked in the business arena for 20 years, and every company that I worked for had core values that were on the wall.
Yeah.
But only one of those companies actually mean anything.
You think the same is true of churches?
I don't know. I hope not. But I would suspect that there might be a few churches where that is the case, maybe more than a few. Yeah. I'd like to talk about let's do this. Let's talk about what core values aren't first. Why don't we get that out of the way, right? So core values are not aspirational.
Okay.
By that I mean, an aspirational value is a value that an organization wants to have. They wish it already had it, or they believe they have to develop this thing in order to maximize success or reach their goals.
Right.
Aspirational values are different than core values.
Okay.
Core values are already there. They're already functioning. You may not have put a name to them yet. You may not even understand that they're operating. Core values do not change over time. They don't come and go with the needs of the organization. So when we identified the core values of Converge Coaching, Jim, we were already operating that way. but it just required me to take a step back and think about what are the most important behaviors here at our company. And it took me, once I took a step back and thought about it for a little bit, I thought, oh, I identified 4 within a few hours. Now, we had to do some work after that, and we're going to talk about it, but their core values are identified. Okay. They're already operating, and I'm getting into this, into the second part of this. Okay. Aspirational values are things that you wish you had. So they're different. Does that make sense?
I think it does. So an aspirational value would be, we're going to be the nicest church. We're going to be the most spiritual church. We're going to be that. We're not, but we're going to be. That's more of a dream, not a core value.
Correct.
A value is the way we're going to get to there is by these things that we firmly believe. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So they're not aspirational. Core values are not permission to play values.
Okay. Explain that one.
So some companies I work for had integrity as one of the core values, or honesty or respect for others. To me, if you don't have those, you shouldn't even be in the building, right? Those are just permission to get on the field.
Yeah.
We expect that out of anybody who comes to work with Converge Coaching. Yeah. You should expect that from anybody who comes to work at the church you lead. Those are permission to play. Here's what core values are. Now, we already kind of talked about this first one. They are identified more than they are created.
Right.
They're these behavioral traits that are inherent in an organization. And I think if I asked you, Jim, you could take a step back and look at the church that you lead, and you would be able to kind of rattle those off. Like, here's the heart of our organization's identity, and I see it. Here's what they are. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Now, you said in a few hours you identified 4. Tell me a little bit about that process. How did you say, like, you can't choose 40 because that doesn't make sense. It's hard to make an acronym out of 40 qualities or even focus on them. But when you found your first one, do you remember what the first one was and how you arrived? What questions did you ask yourself to get that one core value?
I just took a step back and I asked myself, what's important to me?
Yeah.
What's important to the team? What is a behavior that we'll go to the mat for?
Right.
So that if it gets transgressed, we just say, no, that's not acceptable here.
Right.
So the first one I landed on was compassion. And that was just a word. Now we've taken it's on my whiteboard here in my office. It's compassion driven. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that God had given us this ability to step into the pain of our clients. And that when we work with our clients, they know that we feel, and that sounds a little like syrupy, but we actually feel their pain. Because we've been in pain.
Right.
And so that behavior, Jim, matters so much. Right. So if I catch myself working with a client and I don't have that kind of compassion for them, I know that something's not right. It's almost like this rumble strip, right, on the freeway. Right. And if I veer off the freeway and I hit a rumble strip, my whole car shakes. It makes this obnoxiously not loud noise. Yeah. And I instinctively course correct. Right. That's exactly what a core value does. So gotcha. when I am working with a client and I'm not compassionate, I'm not stepping into that with them and feeling that with them, I know either I'm suffering from compassion fatigue, or there's something that I'm missing, that's broken, that needs attention in my life. I'm bumping up against that. Look, we don't do this because we think we know better than you. We don't do this because, hey, we've got ABC. You just follow our little program here, and your life will be beautiful. Yeah. That's not why we do it. We do it because we think that leaders need an ear, a listening ear, a competent ear, but a caring ear.
Yes.
And so Does that help kind of flesh that out a little bit?
It does, because it says Converge cares about the person so that the person can care for the organization. So It isn't how to 10x your organization. It's how to be sane as you grow, how to stay married, how to stay healthy, how to stay, you through the process. Yeah. So let me ask you this. If I'm a client, I sit down with you and there's that half hour, just call us and we'll talk you through some things, type, contact form. And we have our half hour and I said, John, I really don't know. I mean, it's nebulous to me. We're a church, so loving God should be on that list. Loving each other should be on that list. Potlucks, every Thursday should be on that list. Like, how do you know when to cut the list off? Like, I mean, how would you lead me through that process of defining so I can communicate these core values?
Yeah, there would be some questions I'd want to ask you. And walk you through a series of questions, and in no particular order here. So I think I have number 4 here, but I'm going to use that one first. If I ask a pastor to ask himself this question: if you could clone anybody in the organization you lead, who would that be?
Good one.
And that doesn't take them very long, right?
No, I instantly knew who you were talking about.
Right. Yeah. And then I follow up with why.
Yes.
What stands out about them that would make you want 10 more of them?
Right.
And I want you to start to list those qualities that you see in them. This is like putting a puzzle together. So they come up with a list, 5, 6, 10 things. And so that's part of our conversation. We put that off to the side for a minute. Then I follow up by saying something like this: is that trait inherent and natural for your organization? And has it been apparent for the organization for a while? And then we give them time to respond to that, and we kind of work through that together. Here's a good question we ask them: are you more committed to that value than the majority of other organizations who do what you do?
Right.
So, our 4th core value is healthy work-rest rhythm.
Yes.
I believe that we are more committed to that than most organizations.
Yes, for the right reasons.
Who do what we do.
Yeah.
And we value that. We hold that in high regard. I've had conversations with you about that. You've had conversations with me about that. We hold each other accountable to that, and I hold the team accountable to it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of at our church, sometimes we'll take temperatures at the door for those who are serving with children. During the COVID thing, we were doing that in this last year. And I think when you and I take each other's temperature, that's probably the question we're asking most often. How are you? Doesn't mean what'd you have for dinner last night. It means how's your work and rest and how are those things all coming together?
That's right.
If you're overwhelmed, how can I help you? If you're underwhelmed, how can we get you re-engaged and to each other?
Yeah. And so, it probably is a couple of conversations with a lead pastor or a business owner around those questions, and they begin to formulate the pieces and parts of it. And I have them spit them back out to me. We toss them around back and forth. And we come up usually with a list of 6 or 7 things. Now we have 4 core values, and the reason I did that is because I want to be able to remember them.
Yeah.
And I want my team to remember them.
Yeah.
So if you've got 14, it's going to be really hard for people to latch on to that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the beginning, Jim, of the conversation with a leader. Now we're kind of butting up against time here, so I think what I'd like to do is take us through what are some of the next steps in pod number 92. Like, okay, once we've got this identification, and when I say identification, it's not in cement, right? These are 5 or 6 values that we think that we see are inherent, that we are really committed to. We behave this way, and it's important to us. What we're going to talk about next is, in the next pod, is how do we really refine that? How do we give power to those ideas, and then how do we actually use them to start shaping the culture that we need. So does that sound like a good plan?
I love it because it takes a volunteer into a role of being a partner. A volunteer does the job you ask them to do. A partner does the job you ask them to do for the same reason that you're doing what you're doing. There's a shared value. There's a shared, we exist to, that we, man, I tell you what, that volunteers are tough to find. Partners are priceless. People that really see it too. And
that's true. Jim, if I could just say one more thing. So we always start with the leader.
Yeah.
We never start this conversation with the congregation. We never start it with the volunteer force.
No.
We always start with the lead pastor.
Yes.
And then work that through with his staff. And we say this to them very early in that process. You are the culture of this church.
Yes.
It starts here. And if you guys don't get this, good luck with trying to get your church to get it. And so that's why we start there. So in the next part, I'd like to kind of unpack more of this thought process.
We have a saying for that helps us remember it. As I'll walk through the foyer during something and I'll see a couple of staff members out there having a conversation. It's like, oh, no, that's people learn what's important by watching what important people do. And so we say one of our core values is we exist to worship with all of our heart. And you're standing out talking about your golf score. Like that would contradict, but we have said our culture is people learn what's important by watching what important people do. So we stack chairs and we pick up trash because no one here is above serving. That's, when we're worshiping, we're all inside worshiping. When the word's being preached, we're in the front row. We got our notepads out. Why? Because people are learning what's important by watching what important people do. And our lives have to say amen to those values, or they're just contradictory. So, John, that's brilliant. I really look forward. Can you give us a little taste of what we're going to be doing in the next, in pod number 92?
We're going to define we're going to talk about how do I refine these values. Now I've got 5 or 6, 7 of these ideas that I really think are true about us.
Yeah.
How do I add clarity and power to those so that they mean something to me and to my team, that further down the road, we push that down into the volunteer teams, into the entire organization as a whole. So we're going to talk about that, how to refine those so they have some power, and then how to actually shape your culture using the values. So that's what's coming up in 92.
I think this is a good to great principle, or one of those, but there's some with the flywheel principle. Remember that one where it's a huge, heavy flywheel. It takes all your effort to get it rolling, but once it gets rolling, you can actually take your hands off of it and it'll continue to spin without you doing it. And I think it's a Jim Collins principle, but it's a good one here. Culture will keep spinning even when you take your hands off it. And
that's right.
You have to have that. So, John, thank you for your wisdom and your insight. And again, you have more relationships with more leaders than anybody else I know. And then you get to take all these things you've learned and kind of make them simple and practical so we can have the advantage of your experience. Thank you so much for doing this.
My
and
pleasure.
If people want to get a hold of you, I mentioned about having a conversation. How would they get a hold of you to have that conversation?
Yeah, if they just go over to our website, convergecoach.com, we have a contact us link, and that brings up a little form that they would fill out, and they just give us their name and tell us a little bit about the issue they would like to discuss. And we'll talk for a half hour and see if there's anything we can do to be helpful to you.
Right. And these are good things like this. These are bad things like going through a hard time. This is however we can help, we're here to help. So God bless you and those of who joined us today and been a part of this pod number 91. Yeah. 91. And we look forward to 92, which are going to be airing here this next week. And God bless you. We pray for you. We love you. And we hope that you'll continue to lead from alignment.